Take the Leisuremaxxing pill. That is, leisure is the basis of culture. Now indulge me for a brief moment while I'll pose a question that our age, in its infinite haste, seems almost embarrassed to confront. When did we collectively decide that perpetual motion was a virtue? Now think, when was the last time you were truly at leisure, not merely unoccupied nor momentarily freed from obligation, but genuinely suspended above the clamor of utility, poised in that rarefied stillness where thought is permitted to unfold without coercion? One can scarcely open a screen without being assaulted by exhortations to grind, optimize, or otherwise contort one's life into a spreadsheet of dubious triumphs. Yet Josef Pieper, who wrote Leisure is the Base of Culture, with a composure that feels almost insolent in the face of such collective frenzy, reminds us that leisure is not some decorative indulgence for the indolent, but the indispensable condition from any culture that aspires to be more than a glorified productivity contest. A claim so unfashionable, so serenely indifferent to modern sensibilities that one might suspect him of deliberate provocation. And so in this video, I invite you to consider what I half playfully call the Leisuremaxxing pill, a return to the contemplative posture our civilization has quietly forgotten. For if we cannot step outside the ceaseless imperative to produce, we risk forfeiting the deeper capacities that make us more than mere instruments of efficiency. Stay with me then, as we explore why leisure is not a retreat from life, but its most essential affirmation. Let us begin then with the peculiar spectacle of our age's devotion to busyness, a devotion so fervent one might mistake it for a religious rite. We have contrived a culture in which the highest badge of honor is not wisdom, nor serenity, nor even competence, but sheer unmitigated overextension. To confess that one is rested is to invite suspicion. To admit leisure is to risk moral indictment. We have become acolytes in the cult of perpetual motion, congratulating ourselves for being too beleaguered to think. And it is precisely here that Pieper's voice intrudes, calm, unhurried, and therefore vaguely offensive to modern sensibilities. He reminds us that leisure, properly understood, is not the absence of work, but the presence of an inner freedom. It is a posture of receptivity, a willingness to disclose itself without demanding that it justify its existence through utility. Leisure is not laziness. It is the refusal to let one's soul be reduced to a cog in the machinery of productivity. This brings us to Pieper's diagnosis of what he calls the total work society, a society in which the logic of labor has expanded far beyond the workplace, colonizing identity, meaning, and even our sense of self-worth. We no longer merely do work. We are expected to be our work. The modern individual is not a person who happens to have a job, but a job description in search of a person. It is a subtle form of dehumanization, all the more insidious for being draped in the language of ambition and self-improvement. Against this backdrop, Pieper introduces the notion of the philosophical act, an activity that cannot be performed under compulsion, cannot be optimized, and cannot be monetized without being destroyed. Philosophy requires leisure because it requires the ability to step outside the incessant demands of utility. One cannot contemplate the nature of reality while checking email. One cannot inquire into the good life while sprinting on the treadmill of productivity. Thought in its highest form demands a kind of dignified idleness. From this vantage point, Pieper argues that culture itself is the offspring of leisure. Festivals, art, ritual, celebration, these are not byproducts of economic surplus, but expressions of a deeper human need to encounter the world in a spirit of wonder. A society that treats culture as mere entertainment, as a pleasant diversion between bouts of labor, has already lost the plot. It has forgotten that culture is not an accessory to life, but one of its primary modes of meaning. Of course, modernity has attempted to compensate for its spiritual malnourishment by inventing a series of pale imitations of leisure. We are offered self-care, a commodified parody of rest, vacations, which are little more than sanctioned interruptions in productivity, and an endless parade of apps designed to help us relax with the efficiency of a well-managed factory. The irony is almost too rich. We now require technology to remind us to breathe. And so we arrive at the quietly subversive heart of Pieper's argument. Leisure as intellectual defiance. To be at leisure is to refuse the tyranny of total work. It is to reclaim one's inner life from the encroachments of utility. It is to insist that not everything of value can be measured, monetized, or even optimized. Leisure is not escapism, it is clarity. It is the space in which the self becomes visible to itself. Which brings us at last to what I have half ironically and half seriously called the Leisuremaxxing pill. The proposal is simple, that in an age intoxicated by haste, the most rational act may be to slow down. that in a world obsessed with productivity, the most radical gesture may be to sit still. That in a culture that worships busyness, the most subversive identity one can adopt is that of a person who has reclaimed the right to think. Leisuremaxxing is not a meme. It is a metaphysical correction. It is the decision to inhabit one's own life rather than merely manage it. And if Pieper is right, and I suspect that he is, then leisure is not merely the basis of culture, it is the basis of sanity. Thank you guys for watching. All right.